Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Capital G here, and I bet you're not expecting a deck quite like this one. We are looking at Saproling TNT with Tana the Bloodsower and Tymna the Weaver leading the way in my 4-color Saproling deck. Let's see why I went with them and not with, say, Saskia the Unyielding. I was originally thinking Saskia the Unyielding when I put this deck together. Thought it would be funny for this super powerful warrior to lead an army of Saprolings into battle. But I ended up liking having these partners instead, so that's what I did. So, Tana the Bloodsower, 2/2 trample for 4 mana, and when she deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green Saproling creature tokens. Tymna the Weaver, 3 mana 2/2 lifelink, and at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you may pay X life, where X is the number of opponents that were dealt combat damage this turn, and if you do, draw X cards. Doesn't seem like they have a lot in common, except for the fact that you want to deal combat damage to your opponents with both of these creatures. Now, Tana wants to get in herself. Tymna doesn't care if she does it or if it's somebody else that does. But either way, they both like it when you deal combat damage to your opponents. So, let's go wide and deal some combat damage to our opponents. Yeah, and of course they also grant us access to 4 colors, which is why we have Gave, who is not the boss of this deck, nor is Slimefoot, nor is Yulasht, nor is Vertaloff. These are all great Saproling generals in their own right, but they're all missing something, and that's colors. So let's look at the most colorful of them all here. Gave comes in as a 5/5 for 5 mana. Nothing wrong with that. Remove a counter, get a Saproling. Or sacrifice a creature, put a counter back on. Pretty good commander in his own right, as I had mentioned. Michaeloff, Devour 2, so eat some of your Saplings that are already on the battlefield. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, for every +1/+1 counter on Michaeloff, you get that many Saprolings. Of course, because this Devour 2 here says that every creature that you sacrifice into Michaeloff when this guy comes into play gives him 2 counters. So you get a pretty good return pretty quick. Overgrown Armosaur, a 4/4 for 5 mana, in fact. Whenever this deals is dealt combat damage, or any sort of damage really, you get a Saproling token. Slimefoot, a 2/3 for 3 mana. Whenever a Saproling you control dies, this guy will deal 1 damage to each opponent and you gain 1 life. And we are playing with a lot of his aristocrat buddies too in this deck. Spoiler alert there. You can pay 4 mana, of course, and create a Saproling creature token. And we can do that at our whim. Spore Mound, whenever a land comes into the battlefield under our control, put down a 1/1 Saproling token with it. Thelonite Hermit, it's a 4 mana 1/1 that gives all our Saprolings +1/+1. Seems kind of bad on its own, but it has Morph, which means we can play it as a face-down 2/2 creature for 3 mana with no abilities. And later on, pay green 3, flip it face up, and get 4 Saprolings when we do it this way. Costs twice as much, it'll be a total of 8 mana, but we'll have 9 power on the board. Yulasht, he's a little dependent on having creatures already on the battlefield. That's the only downside with Yulasht, but for each other red creature on the battlefield when he comes down, he gets a +1/+1 counter. For each other green creature on the battlefield when he comes in, gets a +1/+1 counter, so he can be pretty big if you've got some Saprolings already growing on your side. Remove a counter, deal 1 damage to target creature, or put a Saproling token onto play. So he can create a bunch of Saprolings for us. That's why he is here. Verdant Force, big mana creature, triple green 5, which is a little tricky in a 4-color deck. But since we're primarily playing green in the deck, it shouldn't be too difficult to make this happen. 7/7. So, gonna do the damage on his own as is, and on top of that, every upkeep, yours and your opponent's, you get another Saproling token. Vertaloff the Ancient, a little easier to cast at 6 mana, 4/7, and it has a kicker of X. The more mana you dump into X, the more Saprolings you get. And on top of that, Saprolings and other tree folk get 1/1. +1/+1. No other tree folk in this deck. It's all about the Saprolings. Of the big three doublers, that is Anointed Procession, Doubling Season, and Parallel Lives, Anointed Procession is the only one that I happen to have in this deck. I only have one copy of Doubling Season that's allocated elsewhere. I don't even have Parallel Lives. But I do have this one, so here it is. Making it so that whenever a token creature comes into play on our side of the battlefield, we get to double the amount of those creatures. Artifact Mutation or a Mutation. This destroys an artifact, this destroys an enchantment, and they both give you saplings based on the casting cost of the permanent you destroyed with those cards. Fungal Plots. This one's a little bit on the clever side here. Green and 1 for this enchantment. Green 1, an exile creature card from your graveyard to create a sapling to each token. Not uncommon for me to let my commanders go to the graveyard, and then I use this ability to send them back to my command zone and create a sapling token. You can also sacrifice 2 saplings to gain 2 life and draw a card. Necrogenesis. This will exile creatures from our opponent's graveyard mostly. 2 exile creature card from any graveyard, but generally our opponent's graveyards, to put a sapling creature onto the battlefield. Rootborn Defenses. Populate, which means we get, if we already have some saplings on the board, we get another one. And creatures we control gain Indestructible, so it's a good way to defend our board. Got a bunch of instances that specifically straight up create saplings. So we got Sapling Migration that creates 2 saplings for 2 mana, or if we kick it with 4 extra mana, we get 4 of them. So 6 saplings for 4 mana is a pretty good rate, especially when they come out of nowhere. Scatter the Seeds. It says 5 mana, get 3 saplings, but we can also cast it by tapping our creatures. It has Convoke. So if we tap a green creature, we get to pay the green mana that way. If you tap a creature that's of any other color, it reduces the cost of the spell by 1 for all intents and purposes. So this, if you already have a board full of creatures, is essentially free saplings. Spore Swarm. 4 mana with no ability to reduce that, but 4 mana for 3 saplings at instant speed. I'm okay with that. Some Anthem effects because our saplings are tiny. Beastmaster Ascension. You might want to wait until you have a bunch of saplings on the battlefield, but once you have, like, say, 6, 7, 8 creatures on the board, pay your 3 mana, drop this down, turn sideways, and everything gets +5/+5. Cathar's Crusade. Since we often get our creatures down in bunches, seems good here. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we get a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. That includes the one that just entered the battlefield. So let's assume we don't have any creatures on the board. We just got wiped or something, but we still have our Cathar's Crusade on the board, and we play Spore Swarm. 3 saplings, they come into play, they see each other come into play. They're 4/4s. They all get +3/+3 thanks to Cathar's Crusade. Domri. New Domri is here. 3 mana Planeswalker, 3 loyalty. Creatures we control get +1/+0. Make our attackers a little stronger. And we can +1 to add a red or green, and our creature spells can't be countered that way. Good way to force our commanders back on the battlefield if the blue player is being a little bit of a jerk. We also have the ability to fight a creature we don't control, but we're not really going to use that one too often unless we have a bunch of Anthems. Ethereal Absolution. 6 mana Anthem. Gives all our creatures +1/+1. Gives all our opponent's creatures -1/-1. Sure, the token creation ability on this thing is a little off theme for us. Create spirits instead of saplings. But that +1 for us and the -1 for our opponents is devastating. Intangible Virtue. Creature tokens we control get +1/+1 and Vigilance, so we're ready for the crackback. Judith the Scourge Diva, another way of giving our board a +1/+0 boost. And, okay, if our saplings die, we don't get to trigger her abilities. It has to be non-token creatures that trigger her ability. But we've got a couple of those floating about, and even then, it's the 1/0 that's bringing her to the dance in this deck. Pledge of Unity. Sweet little uncommon from the new War of the Spark set. 3 mana. Put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control, and then we gain 1 life for each creature we control. I like it. Profit and Loss. Nasty little instant speed Anthem here for us. For 2 mana, we can play Profit. Give all our creatures +1/+1. For 3 mana, we can play Loss. Give our opponent's board -1/-1. And this has Fuse, so we can play both. Remember, not every split card allows you to play both sides. It's only the ones that have the Fuse on it. This one does, so we can play both here. Spore Crown Thallid, a good old-fashioned +1/+1 Anthem for our fungus and our saplings. Not too many fungus in the deck, but we have lots of saplings. Impact Tremors and its older cousin Perforos are both here. Impact Tremor says that whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we deal 1 damage to each opponent. Perforos does the same thing, but 2 damage to each opponent, and it also happens to have this little activated ability that gives all our creatures +1/0. Mentor of the Meek. Assuming we don't have our Anthems in play yet, anytime we get one of our saplings or other small creatures onto the battlefield, power 2 or less, we get to pay 1 mana and draw a card. Shamanic Revelation also draws us a card for every creature we control for 5 mana. And if we happen to have some Anthems out and our creatures happen to be power 4 or greater, for each one that's power 4 or greater, we gain 4 life, giving us a lot of durability. Throne of the God Pharaoh. You know, you turn sideways, you've got like 8 or 9 saplings still sideways. You pay 2 mana and make all your opponents lose 9 life. Your opponents are not going to like you if you do that. But that's why this card is here, because you want to do that. Here's our aristocrat friends: Blood Artist, Cruel Celebrant, Falconraft Noble, Poison Tip Archer. Some only drain 1 opponent at a time, some do it to everybody. Zulaport Cutthroat is here as well, of course. And all of them are effective, so yeah, we're running the whole suite. Skull Clamp is here as well. Whenever one of our creatures die, we get to draw 2 cards. If we get this down before our Anthems, we get to draw a lot of cards. Whisper. It's a good way to keep our commanders on the board, especially. We can let our commanders go to the graveyard, sacrifice a couple of saplings, and bring it right back with Whisper. 4-color decks are playing a lot of mana fixing as well as mana ramp. So we've got cards like Abundant Growth to turn one of our lands into something that can tap for everything, every color. And a lot of these cards have a draw card effect to go with it, so it actually makes our deck a little thinner as well. We've got Circuitous Root and Explosive Vegetation, each pulling out 2 lands. Explosive Vegetables here gives us 2 basics, whereas our little maze card here gets us 2 gate cards. We are running a lot of gates in this deck, so let's take full advantage of this. Commander Sphere, of course, taps for any of our colors, and we can sacrifice it later for a card. Felwar Stone taps for a bunch of colors for us as well. Guild Globe and Prophetic Prism, also the sort of mana correction and filtering. This will only filter 1 time for us. This will filter 1 mana at a time for us, forever. And they both cost 2 and draw us a card when they come down. Sol Ring, of course, taps 2 colorless. Traverse the Uvenwald pulls out a basic land for us in the early going. Pulls out something a lot better once we hit our Delirium. Unbridled Growth also turns one of our lands into something that can tap for all of our colors. And we can sacrifice it later on to draw a card. Urban Utopia draws us a card when we play it, and again turns one of our lands into something that can tap for all of our colors. Verdant Haven, throw this on one of our lands, it taps for its own color as well as a color of our choice. So this is actual ramp. Unlike say these guys here, Verdant Haven is actual ramp. Citywide Bust. We're going to get into some sweepers and removal now. So Citywide Bust, destroy all creatures with toughness 4 or greater. It's pretty hard to get our saplings to toughness 4 or greater, so this is a very one-sided wipe as far as I'm concerned. Crackling Doom makes all our opponents sacrifice their biggest creature and deals a couple of damage to them in the process. Clan Defiance, red, green, X. That's X damage to target creature without flying, X damage to target creature with flying, and X damage to an opponent. Crush Contraband exiles both an artifact and an enchantment typically. Sylvan Reclamation, same thing, except we can pay 2 in the early going and turn it into a basic land if we don't have any good targets in the early going or just really need that basic land to get us going. Last one standing. We get 15 saplings. Of course, I'm going to roll the dice and see if one of my saplings just happens to be that last one standing. And 5 Alarm Fire. This is spicy. I have been impressed with this card in my games with this deck. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage, it doesn't matter if it's to a creature, to a planeswalker, or to a player. As long as one of your creatures is dealing combat damage, you get a counter on this thing. They call it a blaze counter. And once you have 5 or more, you can take 5 counters off of this thing and deal 5 damage to any target. Key to the City. This is mostly for Tana. Tap, discard a card. One target creature can't be blocked this turn. You can also do some political shenanigans with this card. And also, whenever you untap this thing, you can pay 2 to draw a card. So, you get whatever card you discard to make your creatures unblockable, you get it right back. Read the Bones. Just a simple draw spell. Scry 2, draw 2, lose 2. And Theater of Horrors. I figured why not, because we're going to be dealing damage to our opponents pretty easily in this deck. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. If an opponent lost life, you may play cards exiled with Theater of Horrors. And 4 mana to deal 1 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. In a pinch, you pay your 4, deal damage to an opponent. This thing, of course, does let you play exiled lands, so if you happen to have some lands in exile and nothing else you can really do with your hand or battlefield, you pay your 4 and play the land. And kind of accelerate that way. Other than that, our lands, I'm playing perhaps way too many lands that come into play tapped. There's definitely more robust mana bases out there. But I am playing a bunch of gates. I have both Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse here to fix our basics. Command Tower is here, of course. Exotic Orchard is also going to help us greatly with our mana fixing. There's Gateway Plaza. I put the War of the Spark version here. 7 forests, and I also have 4 each of Mountain, Plains, and Swamp in the deck. Guild Mage's Forum. Both our commanders are multicolored, as it turns out, so why not pay that extra mana? Let them come in with an extra +1/+1 counter. You also have a bunch of other multicolored creatures in the deck, like Yulasht and Gave. They can take advantage of this too. It's not restricted to commanders, it's just any multicolored creature. A lot of the tri-lands are here as well. Jungle Shrine, Nomad Outpost. We got Rupture Spire in here as well. And the last land of note is Vidugazi, the City Tree, because, well, pay for it, tap it, and get a Saproling. So, that's the deck I'm rocking. Let's see what EDH Rec suggests for this deck. We're not going to look at lands. We all know the lands that can help us out a lot better. But this is what EDH Rec will suggest for us. Suggesting some targeted removals, such as Utter End. Yeah, Utter End and cards like that would be handy in this deck. I'm not going to deny that. Ironess to give all of our creatures Menace. And prevent all damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures we control. So this would actually be an excellent add to this build. Farseek, of course, pulls out any land that is not a forest. Has to be island, plains, swamp, or mountain card. Steve, of course, also pulls out a basic land. Thunderfoot Bailiff. An excellent choice here. As long as we have him and one of our commanders out, our whole team gets +2/+2 and trample. Mirror Entity, turn our entire board into an XX creatures. So let's see, we've got 8 Saplings in this guy. And have, say, 10 mana open. Well, turn them all into 10/10s, turn sideways. Lightning Greaves, a good add. I didn't have any extra for this deck. Boros Charm to give the board indestructible. That's exactly why it's here. It's just for that indestructibility. We don't care so much about the double strike here or the 4 damage. It's just the indestructibility. Rampant Growth, same reasons as Farseek, of course. And Brutal Horde Chief. This is an excellent add. If you're building a deck like this, definitely consider this guy. Whenever a creature you control attacks, defending player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. I remember there we got a card in, I believe it was, was it Eldritch Moon? It was Eldritch Moon, where it's 5 mana enchantment in black and white, where anytime your creatures attack, for each creature, your opponents lose a life and you gain 1 life. So this would be, if you're going to play this, you play that card as well. And creatures your opponents control block this turn if able, and you choose how those creatures block. It costs 5 mana to activate that ability. 3 borrows, but how bad would it feel if it took, if your opponent had 10 creatures and they all blocked a single Saproling while everything else went through freely? That is a feel bad. As far as price, well, I believe it was showing me a price, let's scroll down here, of $134 US for this build. Most of that is because of her, believe it or not. You'll find this is a very budget-friendly land base that I ended up with here. But really the 2 big cards, or the 3 big ones, are Perforos, Commander Staple of Doom, Anointed Procession. It's a pretty high price considering there's no reason this card won't get reprinted in the future. So keep an eye out for possible reprints on this one. Hopefully that price will come down. And of course, Tymna the Weaver. It's funny how in Commander 2016, Tana was the mythic, but it's Tymna, the rare, who's $20 plus, and Tana is less than $3. It's funny how MTG Finance works that way. But this is not a finance channel. This is becoming more and more of an EDH channel, but I do want to get some more classic video game gameplay up soon, so keep an eye out for that. And I'd like to thank you all for watching this deck tech. I'm Capital G, this was Tana and Tymna, and I will see you all again next time.